With the 2022-2023 FAFSA that just opened this October 1st, 2021, for classes that start after July 1st, 2022, there's some small changes, but significant changes that were made. Welcome back. Episode 2, How to Pay for College. I think this episode, we're really going to be breaking down that budget and understanding the parts that go into it.
Yeah, there's so many ways and approaches you can have to it, so we're about to give them to you. I think that there can be some hesitation when it comes to talking about finances, especially as a college student with your friends and people. You'll have some people in college who come from families where their parents are paying for their college.
Absolutely everything.
You'll have some students in college where they're first generation, they took out loans. Some people are on scholarships. So you're all over the place with what people are bringing financially to their schools and their friendships. So it can be a tough conversation, but looking back on it,
you got to look out for you.
You got to make that, you got to have that conversation. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you'll be having that conversation with other friends and even later on in life. So it's like you said earlier, you start now, you do it right now, or you pay for it later.
Yeah. It's either you put in the work now, and for any of our listeners out there, if you are parents or you are someone still in high school, but maybe just freshman or sophomore year, or even before that, this is not a conversation that has to be put off.
No.
You can definitely start talking to your parents now and have those honest conversations. It's actually the start of having, we call them in like business world and sometimes in school world, courageous conversations.
Oh, I like that.
Having these conversations that may not be the easiest. I know that I grew up in a relatively wealthy town. Mm-hmm. My friends had quite a bit. I didn't want for anything, but I didn't know how much my parents were putting in and sacrificing to make sure I felt that way.
Interesting.
So when it came down to it, I kind of thought just like everyone else in this town, I can go to any school I want to. Mm-hmm. And we'll figure it out. And that was not the case. That was not the conversation. We didn't have the conversation. If we did, it probably would have brought me back to the planet of understanding. And it's a hard thing to understand, I think, especially when you are in high school. But when you start understanding the numbers early on and start kind of thinking about them, because, have you ever had that conversation where you're like, well, how much are you willing to pay? And you don't even know how much something costs. And you're like, I don't know. Like, you give me a ballpark of and they're like, well, the range is, and that's what college is.
It totally is a range, because like you said, you'll go in there and
they're like, how much can you afford? I'm like, what are we looking at? Like $500? And they're like, no, like $5,000. You're like, ooh, that's a lot. But then imagine talking to schools that are like $50,000.
Exactly.
The range is really large. So if you can narrow it down,
yeah,
and work towards it, and if you're younger, mm-hmm. and your parents say, honestly, we can't really afford anything. Yeah. We're struggling to pay to make sure you guys keep this life that you have. Obviously, parents will probably phrase it a little differently, but essentially the bottom line is parents may not be able to contribute, or they're not willing to contribute to your college education. So as a student, now you have that in your head, and now you have to come up with a solution, right? If that's your dream to go to school, now maybe it's time to, if you're at the age where in your town or your city, you can have your parents sign to let you work before the age of 16. Maybe it's a 15 or maybe 14 years old. Maybe start working, start saving now.
Yep.
Put that money away now and start building that up so that you can help cover your costs of college. And start applying for scholarships.
Absolutely.
Honestly, you don't have to wait until you're going to school or you know where you're going. Even through our scholarshippoints.com program, the sweepstakes scholarship program we have, you can be as young as 13. And if you win a $1,000 scholarship or a $10,000 scholarship and you're not ready to go to school, we have methods to make sure that money will still be used for you to go to school.
Exactly.
And we're not unique in that. There are other scholarship opportunities out there for younger students who will help them pay for school.
Yeah, we have awarded several scholarships to individuals who weren't the scrambling seniors.
Not ready to go yet.
Yeah, absolutely. We have there are tons of scholarships out there that are available for individuals who aren't going to college like tomorrow.
Yeah,
so
and there are some available
early.
for them going tomorrow. might be a little tight, especially if it's literally tomorrow. But,
yes.
If it's a few months away, you still have scholarship opportunities that will help you pay for your next term. But, that's just could be something if you're not old enough to work yet, or maybe you're doing that as well as this. Taking on scholarships and looking at that can really help you get to the school you want to go to.
Absolutely.
Like, you can take some of that ownership, because honestly, when you get to college, this is one of the first times I feel like students start hearing like, well, when financial aid advisors, admissions counselors, they're asking you questions, you're like, let me ask my parents. They're like, no.
They're not here.
This is not your parents' decision. This is your decision. Now, with financial aid, you might have to provide your parents information.
Absolutely.
But it's on your application. It's the student's application. So there is some ownership there to start taking some of the responsibility onto yourself. And everyone has a different situation. If you've got a talent, start working on it and see if there's a way to get to certain schools with it, like music ability, art, sports. We all know about sports. I feel like that's one of the biggest ones is, trying to get a sports scholarship. But there's far more talents that are awarded scholarships.
I think we're in the day and age now where it feels like there's almost a scholarship.
Esports,
anything.
Yeah, just about anything.
Anything. I mean, yeah, you said esports.
Color hair.
Yeah.
I think we have a redhead scholarship.
We've got an article that's called like Weird Scholarships.
Weird and unusual scholarships.
It's just scholarships that you go, what? Yeah. There's scholarships for that?
And now it's some of them are super simple. Some of them like require maybe creating a dress out of tape.
Yes.
Can't use the name of the tape.
Of course.
Of course. We'll stick and make sure our compliance team is happy with us. But there's like different scholarships that you can go out and find and start working towards that will help you achieve your own goal.
Right.
And then honestly, when I do financial aid nights, everyone's like, well, how old do you have to be? And I'm like, honestly, if you think you're going to go to school, learning the lingo never hurts.
Yeah.
Because how much lingo did you have to learn? Like the FAFSA, did you have any clue that existed?
I heard about it, but I think before I went to college, I couldn't tell you what FAFSA stood for.
Yes.
I heard it, but if you told me, hey, what's the official name of it? Like it's short for something. What is it short for? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a government form, so an acronym usually coincides with that.
Yeah.
But things like the FAFSA, the CSS profile, all are financial aid applications. And then you start hearing words like grants, scholarships, fellowships,
what's the difference?
Loans. Yeah. And you start to think, well, what's the difference? And then even within the loans, you were, I did my little disclaimer check, subsidized versus unsubsidized. And, honestly, I was so confused.
I didn't know the difference when I got it. I just knew one was $2,500 at the time, and then the other one was $3,500.
I was hoping like this, honestly.
$3,000, I think.
Yeah, probably $3,000.
Yeah, it was $2,500 for one, and the other one was $3,000. Yep.
Yeah. And I was just sitting here like this, like, I hope the one I got is the right one. That was the need-based one that didn't have interest accruing while I was in school.
Yep.
And I didn't understand that they were the same program, but two different types. And I kept asking the school, and literally I asked the school because I'm like, I need more money. And they're like, well, this is what you got. And I'm like, but I need more.
Please help me.
And I'm like, well, can I have more of the loan that's more beneficial? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I got Stafford loans. I need more Stafford. They're like, you got maxed out. I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, well, you have the sub, which is the one everyone likes, the subsidized loan, the direct subsidized loan. And then you have unsubsidized loan. And I was like, well, can we just make it all subsidized? And they're like, no. And I'm like, but why? And it's a conversation I'm sure they have all the time. But if you get used to this lingo, and I'm sorry, you just have to.
You got to learn.
You have to, especially if you really want to be careful with that budget and creating it and understanding what your options are. You got to get used to what these words mean and kind of the constraints of these programs. Because people say all the time, well, I filled out financial aid. I got my expected family contribution from my FAFSA form, and it's $12,000, but the school says I own $20,000. But, honestly, you start to learn, the expected family contribution from your FAFSA form is really just used by the school as an index number to kind of compare you to other situations.
Yeah.
And they award you what they can, but these federal programs that are the most relied upon financial aid out there, they're very helpful, very useful, but they may not be enough. And that EFC, that expected family contribution, you could have to pay less or you could have to pay more than it.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out that way.
That's so true.
So that's why sometimes those outside budgets really create like just bringing you in and helping you figure it out.
Yeah, I agree. So like what tips would you give someone for setting up a budget? Like what should they be looking to examine as far as their spending for a college student?
Yeah. So for a college student going to school?
Yeah, college student going to school.
So for a college student going to school, if you're not exactly in school yet, like a few months out, honestly ask your parents or anyone who helps you pay for everyday living expenses, like your toiletries and all that sort of thing, to kind of give you an idea of what they spend. Now, you probably don't have to, you're supplying it just for yourself, not for the whole family, but it's good to get an idea that laundry detergent can be $12. It's a good idea to get an understanding that toothpaste can be $3 to $4, depending on that. And some of the other things you need, as well as get an idea of how much laundry costs on campus and start to develop an idea of what you will need to spend. Obviously, you learn over time, like 1 tube of toothpaste might last you the whole term.
It might.
But, if it doesn't and you're using it really fast, I mean, that's that little meme.
Oh, yeah, you got, are you using a lot of it? Or,
a little.
Or are you using it sparingly?
Honestly, you need to figure out what your life costs every day. A little bit, to some extent. It can be a little give or take here and there. Have a conversation with your parents on what they're going to cover while you're in school. Cell phones. You rely on cell phones a lot these days, and college students are no different.
Yeah.
Are your parents or whoever was paying for your cell phone when you're younger? Could have been you, so you already know the answer to that. But are they going to continue while you're in school? That's a big conversation. That's a huge expense. That could be $100 or more a month,
it really
depending
could.
on what you have.
That's very possible.
And then other things to keep in mind beyond paying just the direct tuition, are going to be how much are your books? Get an idea. If you're already enrolled in school or you're already accepted and you have your first classes already picked out, you already might have that syllabus.
Yeah, that's true.
And they will tell you what books you need ahead of time. They do actually do this ahead of time because they are required to.
I didn't know they were required.
They're required
to
to tell you ahead of time if they're participating in federal student aid.
Interesting.
Because they need to give you an opportunity to be able to purchase those books with financial aid money before you go to class.
Wow.
Schools do it a little differently. Sometimes they'll kind of give you a voucher and because you've already been accepted with your financial aid, if there's no problems with your application and all that's kind of through, they'll let you do a voucher or let you kind of pick up how much, take aside to use it at the school bookstore. But there's different ways schools will do that to make sure you can get your books and supplies before you need it. But create that budget. Every term, you're going to need to do that.
Yeah, I'd say revamp it every term.
Because every term, you're going to understand what books do I need, and then what books, like the cost of them and supplies, because not every class actually requires books. It could be a class pack. It could be software. It could be a wide range of different things. Also get to know the resources on your campus. Does the library have access to these books? Maybe if you know anyone who's gone to the same school, someone a little older than you, or someone who's been in the same classes as you before, how much did you use that book? Is it something where I could get away with using it at the library? Or is it something that I really should have a copy?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And also look at rental options and all that stuff. But if you do that ahead of time, you start establishing some of that budget. And then when it comes to food, I know we keep going back to this, but it's a huge topic when you're in college.
It's a big expense.
Especially if you're living on campus. And even if you're not living on campus, especially in your situation.
I wasn't bringing a lunch to school every day.
You weren't bringing a lunch to school, but you were driving there and you knew it was expensive and for gas. So you probably weren't going back and forth and leaving campus all the time. So there are probably things you have to realize, like how much does it cost you to get food in your area, and set a budget around that if you don't bring it yourself, or make it yourself, or use your meal plan. So kind of look at the expenses you need to spend money on every single day and start putting together a budget. And you don't have to wait until the day you start.
No.
You can start working on it and making adjustments and tweaks to help you kind of accommodate everything you need. And the tweaks could be like some sacrifices of things you like versus the things you need.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Instead of getting coffee from a brand name coffee shop, maybe getting it from a small stand in a school. Maybe asking, and this is like one of those, I don't know why this came to me, but maybe asking a friend who brings coffee anyways, like, hey, can you grab one for me? If they're making it at their own home or stopping in an apartment, or maybe like sharing some, because in college you share a lot. I feel like that's one of the times I share the most. Hey, you need this book? Why don't you borrow it? I'll borrow this one for a little bit because we used to get the actual books.
Oh, yeah.
We used to get the textbooks.
Everything is so digitized.
And it was so heavy that one of my friends and I actually decided that we were in some of the same classes because my freshman dorm, everyone was the same major.
Okay.
Which was interesting.
That is interesting.
So we all kind of worked out a thing, like some of us who had the same classes, like, I'll buy the book for this class, you buy the book for that class, and then we'll sit next to each other in class.
That's smart. Oh, wow.
And then afterwards, if we want to study, we would study together.
That's what you call like networking.
Well,
Seriously.
it really was helpful because we were all the same major. I know that's not the same for everyone.
Right, absolutely.
And after freshman year, it didn't quite work as easily, and also I switched majors, so then I had to figure it out on my own. But then also after that first year, I learned how books are used in class. There's definitely teachers, and you learn really quickly when class starts that they are following the book, they're referencing the book, everyone has their book open in class, and then there's other teachers who are kind of referencing it, but they never have you bring it to class, you never use it in class, and even when it comes to the test, your notes are more reliable than the book because you'd have to honestly read a lot more of the book to get what to know.
And nowadays, you just buy the book for access code so you can do homework.
Yeah.
Your homework is all online for lots of classes, and you might not even really go through the book. You need to pay that $100 plus for that access code so you can do homework.
Yeah.
And then everybody has to buy the book or buy the access code at that point.
And that's when you start to realize which classes and how they work.
Yeah.
And some of that can even be, you can figure out information by looking at that syllabus.
Yeah.
Because it'll tell you exactly what you need to do. And usually if it is an assignment that would be tied to a book or an access code, you start to pick up on different things around that. Mm-hmm. So it's super helpful.
Yeah, you get that ISBN number, go crazy.
Yeah.
Once you got it, it's the fingerprint of all books, so you just put that thing into a search engine, and then after that,
you can figure out where to get it cheapest.
Yes.
And also renting.
Oh, yes, you can rent books. I rented several books in college because I had just learned that there were a lot of these textbooks we wouldn't use afterwards.
Yeah.
So I just said, I kind of felt a little guilty. So I was like, I'm going to return this book. But then it was like, probably won't read it again. So
you don't read them again.
Maybe I should rent it so I can get it back and not have to pay full price for it.
And especially some of those core classes that you have to take books.
Yeah.
You're taking the courses because you have to. It's required. But it may not be something that you have to use for your future career because it's not really tied to your specialty.
True.
Like I was a political science major, so I did have to take some math classes. I tested out of a few, but I did have to take one math class. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to buy this book. I remember I did rent that particular book, an actual physical book, but I rented it because I knew that afterwards I probably wouldn't need to reference that again. Yeah. But some of my political science books, some of my writing books, shout out to Strunk and White. Those books I did purchase because not only of the advisement of my professors and teachers and other students, but just the idea of knowing that I might reference these later. Yeah.
Books can just be, it can be hit or miss. Some books you can rent, some books you have to buy in order to take the class. You got to do your homework, and maybe you have to buy your books in order to do so because they have that access code or something like that. But yeah, it just kind of depends. But like you said, if you do have the option to rent, and this is maybe a book that you won't be touching after the semester, then just rent it. Rent it. Save yourself the hassle.
Digital copies are generally cheaper than buying actual books.
Yes.
Which is great now, and it saves your back from the days of having to carry the backpacks or the side packs.
That was me in middle school.
That was me still in college.
Big backpack middle school.
I remember I tried every bag under the sun to get the books to and from while being stylish. Mm-hmm. Waste of money.
Oh my goodness.
Stuck with the backpack.
That is funny. Thank you for making it to this point in the podcast. As you know, we're bringing you a bonus code with every episode. Use the bonus code BUDGET for 100 points on scholarshippoints.com. Remember that you can use those points to enter scholarships available exclusively on the website. Once again, use the code BUDGET. That's BUDGET.
Edvisors in the news. So today we're going to talk about the FAFSA. This is an application that we reference all the time in podcasts, when I go live on social media, on Ask the Edvisor, and financial aid nights, if you happen to have seen me in public. FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It is arguably, not even arguably, the most important financial aid application if you are planning to go to college and you need some assistance to pay to go to college.
Hands down.
Yes. It comes out every October 1st for the following fall. Sometimes there's changes that are made to the FAFSA. It might look similar to years past, but there could be some slight differences or different types of questions on there from previous years. With the 2022-2023 FAFSA that just opened this October 1st, 2021, for classes that start after July 1st, 2022, there's some small changes, but significant changes that were made. Things like selective service. You'll still see that question for males over the age of 18 on there. However, your response and answer to that will not affect your financial aid. The FAFSA no longer will require men over the age of 18 to select yes or to register me now in order to receive financial aid.
Interesting.
Now, selective service is still a requirement of males over the age of 18, but the FAFSA and your financial aid won't be affected if you answer no to that question. We do have students going to school who are 17 and such who aren't required to register yet, or maybe some students who just haven't registered. The FAFSA is still an option to register with selective service, and you'll still see that question on there, but just note that if you do happen to answer no for whatever reason, there's a lot of circumstances out there where that could have happened, that it won't affect your financial aid eligibility. Another change on there, a question you will still see, is asking you, did you have a drug conviction while receiving federal financial aid? Before, if you answered yes, you would actually have to take a few steps in order to regain your eligibility for federal student aid.
Wow.
And now they've actually removed that requirement. If you answer yes, the question will still be on there. It might ask you a few follow-up questions, but essentially as long as you're meeting all the other criteria and it was just a drug conviction while receiving federal student aid, that will no longer affect your ability to receive financial aid from that point. So those are some of the changes on there. The FAFSA might not look too different if you completed it last year, but just to note, those are some important changes. And I know some students who maybe have some of these concerns or issues with selective service, thinking that they're not sure if they've registered or not. And also students who may have received drug convictions, they might have a hesitation or anxiety around that, thinking maybe I'm not eligible for financial aid. And there have been changes made that, you'll still see that question on there for this FAFSA cycle. However, it's not going to affect your ability to receive financial aid. Some things you've heard in the news as well is there's going to be some changes to the expected family contribution. That's going to be for a future FAFSA. That's not something that's going to affect you completing the FAFSA now. Once you fill out all the information, that information will be used to calculate your expected family contribution. It will still be called that. The EFC is another way it's referenced and how people talk about it.
Yes.
So the EFC is still going to be there. They're still going to use that for this FAFSA cycle. Right now, there are talks to maybe give the U.S. Department of Education some time to switch over to what's known as the Student Aid Index, SAI. But as of right now, for this FAFSA cycle and what you need to know for this FAFSA cycle is that it's still the expected family contribution in there. And that's what you will see at the end.
That's the news.
That's the news.